A movie starring Nicolas Cage and Selma Blair about filicide convinced me to actually like horror movies and helped me parent better. And I know, that's that's a lot to open up with, but it's true. Mom and Dad is a dark comedy horror movie written and directed by Brian Taylor that was released theatrically on January 19th, 2018. It is a movie that explores in the most brutal ways possible the tensions of resentment against your children or life that can fester if you don't have a strong sense of self and personal growth as you raise children. And I know that's a tall order of realizations from a movie that has Nicolas Cage barking like a dog while chasing his movie son around their house with murderous intent, but hopefully in time it'll make sense. And here's the thing. In the past, I had a tendency to write off horror movies as just grotesque displays of violence or expressions of the inner twistedness of the human mind. I never considered them to be an examination of internal dualities or explorations of social commentary. They were nothing more than standard final girl tropes with violence, nudity, and bad decision making on a level that makes handing me a pair of tongs during the alien invasion from A Quiet Place and expecting me not to click them together with the fury of a thousand suns like genius level thinking. And while dark comedy horror movies are not completely in the realm of full on horror, they tend to spare very little when it comes to tension, violence, or suspense. More often, though, they tend to take those moments or build ups to those moments and undercut them with a joke, visual gag, or a fourth wall break, which, when done correctly, can articulate what the audience is thinking while watching. These undercuts are masterfully done in movies like Tucker and Dale vs. Evil, Cabin in the Woods, and Army of Darkness, for example. Mom and Dad definitely has moments of comedy dispersed throughout it, which is helpful because the theme of resentment is portrayed through brutal acts of violence while also using its characters, primarily the Ryan family parents, to expand how these resentments can start and their effects mentally and emotionally over time. Although the violence feels extremely gratuitous, the point of it is to force a reaction of discomfort and introspection from the parents in the audience while watching it. And this movie does a great job of making you feel incredibly uncomfortable as a parent, often framing benign daily encounters parents have with their children as something more sinister. I know, you're probably like, what the crap? How does any of this make sense to my opening statement of how this movie helped me become a better parent and actually enjoy horror as a genre overall? But I promise, again, I promise this will all make sense if you stay with me, hopefully. And if this sounds interesting to you, then this is your obligatory spoiler warning if you haven't seen the movie yet. But more importantly, I just want to say thank you for being here. Your support is always appreciated, and if you get to the end of this and want to see me cover more topics or things like this, but then please by all means subscribe, and leave a comment and let me know what you think. I honestly would be curious to know your thoughts as well. Now, I'm not going to explain the entire movie because that's not what the aim of this video is, but here is a quick and overly simplistic synopsis of the movie's premise according to me. The movie follows the individuals of the Ryan family when a mass hysteria event takes place, causing parents to suddenly and without any explanation other than some odd signal they experience to begin to attack their own children. And as an added point of clarification here, the parents only attack their own children regardless of what age they are. There's no age limitation here. So it's not like open season on any child in sight, nor does it seem that grandparents will attack their own grandchildren. However, there is no hesitation for any parent to remove any person in the way of them getting to their child. The Ryan family is comprised of Father Brent, played by Nicolas Cage, Mother Kendall, played by Selma Blair, and their two children, daughter Carly, played by Ann Winters, and son Josh, played by Zachary Arthur. Now, although there are other characters involved in this movie, for simplicity's sake, we're going to really just primarily focus on Brent and Kate. When you become a parent, there isn't a brochure with all the do's and don'ts paperwork that they hand to you alongside your newborn that says, not only will this amazing creature that you will love so deeply will cause you to lose sleep, it'll also show you that as a parent, you'll lose friends, opportunities, and all too often, your sense of self. And while there are so many themes that can be explored in this movie, the loss of self is what I want to look at primarily through both parents, Brent and Kendall. I believe these two characters embody this concept in two very different ways, and, minus all the violent stuff that they end up doing, very relatable ways. Brent is a character that embodies this sense of inability of letting go of what you believe to be your glory days or perceived missed potential. Brent views becoming a parent and even to an extent being married as something that he believes squashed all of his potential and dreams. So, I want to say before we go any further that in life we can find ourselves pouring into past mistakes, nostalgia, memories of better times, or missed opportunities from time to time. I think those things are completely normal to muse over with the occasional what if thought experimental daydream. Like, what if you made this decision? What if you dated this person? What if you won the lottery? What if so on and so forth? Like, you get what I'm saying. And to me, there is a huge difference between idle musings of these scenarios and being so obsessed over them, can't move past them. To Brent, much like a lot of us when we were younger, the world was his to take, and he was going to take it. But unlike Brent, a good majority of us come to grips with the reality of untethered youthful ambition and understand that we may never take on the entire world, we can take the world we have in each passing moment and thrive in it versus what he does, which is settling for and being bitter because of it. Brent is one side of what I am calling a parental resentment coin because this is an issue that arises from either losing your sense of self, as we'll see in Kindle later, or not having a strong sense of self. More specifically, in Brent's case, your sense of self is so rooted in what you considered the glory days you fail to grow out of their shadow. As I've alluded to earlier, parenting is difficult. Its complexity is matched in its relentlessness in the consumption of your time and energy, which I personally believe is worth it, the effort that goes into it, but And it's in that complexity of parenting that we can fall into the daydreams and desires for the simplicity we once took for granted, which again, things like subtle daydreams for a simpler life are not bad within themselves because they offer a minor form of escapism, almost like a pressure valve release for the feelings of resentment to be let go off and released into. But the pipeline to get to the place where that is all you want, all you dream of, and then live out this resentful existence is very, very short. And as someone who became a father relatively young, there are moments that I regretfully acknowledge were wrought with bitterness and resentment because I would see my childless or single peers doing all the things that I then considered to be amazing and fun. And then I would find myself window shopping my life away to their experiences while I robotically changed the umpteenth diaper of the day. Brent, to put it bluntly, idolizes this young sex god version of himself. To him, that was his prime and a measure of his worth and vigor as a person. Like, we get glimpses of this seeping through in his constant comments of Carly's boyfriend and what stereotypical boys really want at his age, even though the movie goes to lengths to show Carly's boyfriend is the opposite of those things. We see it in the way he interacts with his son Josh when we're counting his teenage years, the knowledge that Brent has of available explicit material for young people, and his own teenage-like fixation on sex. This portrait, he believes, is perfectly exemplified by his life prior to kids, marriage, and before the weight and requirement of these responsibilities beat him into submission to be the man he currently is, repressed, old, and left longingly window shopping his own past. Brent's behavior can be synonymous with your average midlife crisis exploration, but I feel that is too simple of an explanation. It can be inferred that Brent has always struggled with this sense of existential crisis of being a husband and father. We see these tensions via keeping his high school car and the pool table basement renovation scene with Kendall. I picked out these two scenes specifically out of a plethora of examples because I really feel like these best exemplify this resentment within Brent. Brent's car sits idly in their garage and is the last tangible relic of his glory days. While some people make rooms full of trophies, awards, or items to be displayed, Brent's car remains in the garage, almost as if this house is representative of the life Brent currently has, which is keeping his true desires from being released. To Brent, this car is the totem of his youth and virility. Whenever we see flashbacks of the car, it's never current or even after kids him driving it, but him in his teens or early 20s with a topless girl in his lap while he does donuts in the parking lot. I guess that was the pinnacle of coolness. I don't know. I never experienced that. And even though Kendall has repeatedly asked him to get rid of the car, fully aware of its torrid history, Brent cannot, because it is something that he has kept to look upon and to revel in his identity of who he believes he should be. He fiercely defends this vehicle not because it is monetarily valuable, but because it is untouched by age, as if frozen in time during the best moments of his life where he so longed be. We are shown the value of this longing to him in a memory where, after a poignant and heartwarming conversation with Josh, his son, Brent discovers an animal that had died in his car after Josh rescued and put it in there for safekeeping. And he told Josh that if he ever touched his vehicle again, he would kill him with unflinching facial expression and certainty. Now, don't get me wrong, there are mementos that we all hold on to because of an emotional attachments to them for one reason or another. There's a huge difference between holding on to something because we cherish the memory it elicits versus holding on to something because we believe it is the last fragment of who we were and so long to be. It's very easy to look at Brent as this shallow character only meant to be taken at face value, which is why pool table renovation scene he has with Kendall is so important. The scene told through flashbacks exemplifies how deep-seated this loss of self really is for him. Brent doesn't even like playing pool, yet he buys a pool table and painstakingly spends time making sure it's level after assembling it, only to ultimately destroy it with a sledgehammer while singing a sinister version of the Hokey Pokey. After he and Kendall began arguing over his purchase of it, stating his desire for space from kids, and then frustratingly see that the pool table itself is not level again. What makes this more interesting to me is the renovation really highlights his undercurrent of immaturity and impulsivity due to the renovation not even being anywhere near complete before he put together and attempted to level a freaking pool table in the middle of it. And although I know it's a bit late into the discussion of Brent's character to mention this, but Nicolas Cage absolutely freaking eats up every scene that he is in the best ways possible. Because it is so completely all over the place and over the top emotionally, it gives the sense that Brent has repressed things so far down that if not for this mass hysteria event taking place in the movie, it probably would have begun to leak out more and more in impulsive and immature behaviors. Don't get me wrong, you do get snippets of Brent's emotional instability prior to the signal throughout his interactions with his family, but they are fleeting and for the most part harmless. The destroying the pool table is the only violent-esque outburst we actually see from him. And while the car is this last relic of his glory days, the pool table here and by extension the basement are the last bastions of hope for separation he has. The car represents this emotional separation he has from his life, whereas the basement and pool table are a physical one, which makes him destroying it all the more impactful. This impulsively put together pool table to me symbolizes his desire to reclaim the idea of his youth, constant battle of making it level, mirroring the fragile balance of being a parent and holding on to this idealized version of himself, with Kendall acting as the reality of their life via her interjecting commentary of him not liking pool and the concerns of money and Christmas. And then the hammer that he uses to destroy the table being the crushing weight of reality versus aspirations, and the Hokey Pokey song acting almost as a roundabout way to mean that his children were the ones wielding these things that smashed his hopes, dreams, and ability. There is this conversation between he and Kendall after the destruction where he fully espouses his regret and feelings of defeat he currently exists in rather than suppressing them by aptly summing up his entire mentality by saying to Kendall, "I remember the kid I used to be like it was 4 effing minutes ago. My feet barely touched the ground back then. My kill ratio was 9 out of 10. It was 100% sex. That guy in a million years could never have pictured this tired mother effer he turned out to be. Flat on his ass, fat, bald, cottage cheese, effing ass, blue bonnet, butter waistline with hair coming out of his ears and nose. My salary went from $145,000 to $45,000. And at the end of this rant, he sits down after yelling and screaming to Kendall, not at her, but to her. He sits down in almost defeat. And then he looks at her and basically just says, "Do you know what I mean?" To which Kendall somberly replies to him, "Oh yeah, I get it." She empathetically understands this position that Brent is in because it is a position that as parents and specifically young parents, we understand that when we became parents so young, we had to sacrifice a good bit of our youth so that they could be taken care of. What I find interesting is that later in this whole entire flashback, he says, "We used to be Kendall and Brent, but now we're just mom and dad."
Oh, he said the title right there. Oh.
It isn't until later that we really get a glimpse of how deeply disconnected to himself Brent really is. This exposure of himself is brought into the light after being introduced to the signal. Brent is seen to be impulsive emotionally and almost childlike, looking constantly to Kendall for direction as if he has finally become the emotionally stunted teenager of his glory past. It's almost as if the signal to Brent allowed him to remove this mask of maturity and fatherhood he wears to truly reveal his long-standing resentment of the life he lives and his self-inflicted stuntedness as someone who remains in the past. Brent is seen moving from anger to crying, inability to formulate plans, while also delivering one of my favorite lines in the movie.
Sawzall means it. Saws all.
Although this signal is obviously detrimental to his own health and to his children, it seems to free him from the boundaries of his paternal resentment by allowing him to carry out the darkest motivations possible in order to be released from them. Most poignantly on display in the movie is where the car he so lovingly guarded, he destroys without hesitation to get the Josh who is hiding in it. Like, obviously, this is a beautiful setup from their previous conversation that they had before, and it's actually intercut with this scene, this flashback, and I thought it was really well done. But this shows how Brent, in some ways, always possessed the ability to break free from his self-imposed mentality, but was unwilling to because it meant he truly had to let go of this version of himself that only he would or could accept. And as someone who has personally seen parents who cannot let go of their supposed glory days, I can tell you that it's always detrimental to their relationships with their spouse and their children. Like, nostalgia is a tricky beast. While it can elicit fond memories and emotions of times both bitter and sweet, it also has a tendency to be viewed from rose-colored glasses. And when we live solely in those moments, not allowing current reality and its infinite potential for making better memories to puncture the ballooning emotions attached to nostalgia, we are left comparing those around us and ourselves to an idealized, intangible, and unattainable fantasy. It breeds more bitter than sweet and ultimately a feeling of isolation. Brent's character is very interesting to me overall because it really just shows what happens if we don't allow ourselves to let go of the things that we thought we were supposed to be in order to accept the things that we actually are and the things that we are going to be. Brent is so trapped in this past version of himself that he cannot see nor appreciate the future that he does have and is attempting to build in these moments with his family. And for me, seeing this journey that Brent goes on has allowed me to be introspective of the position that I have had and the ideas or desires that I thought were very important to me at the time, only to realize that I don't need to be this version of myself that I thought that I was supposed to be. Rather, I need to be the person and the parent in the moment with my children, in the moment with my spouse. Now we have the other side of this parental resentment coin, Kindle. There are transitionally important periods in all of our lives as we grow up where we move steadily into becoming more and more independent. We learn to crawl, walk, talk, feed, dress ourselves, become self-aware, and eventually get to the point where we branch out from our familial home to claim some stake of the world as our own. That's growing up. And while these things are expressed to parents ad nausea in books and social media on how to cultivate, encourage, support, and come alongside your child, it can be very difficult to do that. Parenting is very involved. It takes time, mental energy beyond compare, and an extreme level of personal sacrifice. Kindle is representative of the idea of losing oneself when becoming a parent. And as much as I hate to like how stereotypical this sounds, I feel anecdotally, and checked with my wife on this one, losing who you are is very common of mothers due to having experienced the most amount of change to their lives both physically and mentally. This loss for Kendall is highlighted strongly with her relationship with Carly. Kendall clearly states that her children have been her entire world since having them. In essence, her identifying factor or purpose in life is being a mother. And as they grow older, she's losing that grounding aspect of who she believes she is. While not spiraling into being overly controlling or completely absent in her children's lives, as I have seen a lot of parents do, Kendall is grasping onto this ideal of who Carly used to be in the context of their relationship due to its grounding nature in her identity as a person. And instead of becoming more independent in her own life alongside Carly, she continues to press into Carly in hopes of reaffirming that she still has purpose. Carly calls Kendall out in a conversation they're having by telling Kendall that she has no life after Kendall tells her that being a mother is her life. And while this is a quick exchange between the two of them, this conversation really paints that picture between the vacancy of purpose as your children grow more and more confident in themselves as individuals, and realizing as parents how dependent we've become on said children for our own measure of self. Like, really think about it. Like, my kids are happy, they're healthy, they're taken care of, they're thriving, and given every opportunity I've never had before. Like, I'm a good parent, a good person, and productive not only in my own life, but my family's life and society. And so when our children grow away from us independently, as they should after 18 years, you're left feeling as if you're out of the job. You've devoted 18 plus years only to realize that your position's job title has changed from involved everyday parent to passive observer and advisor. Kendall, after this discussion with Carly, attempts to return to a work opportunity she had before she had children. I believe this briefly displays the concept that when we, as individuals, lose a key identifying factor of ourselves, we tend to go back to the last thing we had that we felt encapsulated us as a person. Unfortunately, Kendall's attempt to reconnect with an old work opportunity proved to be confirmation of how far removed from the life outside of being a parent she is. She is told that she's been too far removed from this industry and should take classes in order to basically be at the place interns are. This further drives home the fact that if we don't grow and cultivate ourselves alongside our children with our own hobbies, interests, and education, not only do we put a significant amount of emotional weight and dependency upon them to fill those voids, we are indeed left hollow and meandering in our own lives as they grow up. Kendall almost seems to timidly float between these moments that we've talked about of her life up until she gets the call that her sister is in labor and gives birth. In the moments leading up to the birth scene, Kendall is reassuring her sister how worth all of this is, almost as if she's reaffirming it within herself, this sense of identity and self. While in the delivery room, her sister subsequently falls victim to the mysterious signal and attempts to not be a mother. Kendall then saves the child from her sister, and we can see where Kendall then begins to grow attached to it, as if using this child to yet again reaffirm her sense of self and identity. She is seen later almost willing to fight hospital staff to protect this child she is now holding, because much like Brent in his car, this is the last true physical representation she has of her crumbling sense of self. But unlike Brent, who has the ability or eternal force to let go of the car, aka his idealized version of himself in life, Kendall has the child taken from her via external force, which to me parallels how her identity of a mother is slowly taken away from her by two external forces outside of anyone's control: time, age. However, Kendall's sense of timidness quickly dissolves into confidence, focus, and purpose when she is exposed to the signal, hinting that this is who she was before completely devoting or really losing herself into parenting. Which in a way makes sense to me, because it takes what appears to be multiple exposures to the signal for Kendall to finally be overcome by it. Now let me tell you, she is a freaking tour de force. She is the one who is coming up with the plans. She's the one who is more methodical and patient in her approach to the children. She's ingenuitive. Like the coat hanger scene it's so good to me. It's one of my favorite scenes. She even acts as if she's not been taken over by the signal so convincingly that at like first watch I was like, oh, she's good. Wow, she really like overcame. Oh no, she's not. She's trying to take her children out, and not to dinner, and not to dinner. And I must say, on my first watch, seeing Selma Blair transform Kendall, who prior to the signal was so timid and almost needing the acceptance of those around her, into this confident, focused, and natural leader was spectacular. I was just like, oh my, oh my. Like, she absolutely nails the tenderness and brutality that offsets Brent's more sporadic nature. Just loved every freaking scene that Selma Blair was in this movie. Like, she's my favorite character in this movie. Kendall is undeniably a strong and natural leader at her core, which makes the dynamic of her relationships between her and her family all the more frustrating to me, because we could see from the outside perspective how much of herself she truly gave away in order to fully devote herself into being a mother. Like, disclaimer, not that being a mother is a bad thing at all. I think it's a great and beautiful, wonderful thing. I just think in the context of this movie, it shows over and over how much Kendall has allowed herself to believe that that is all she is and all she has to offer to the world. Kendall's character to me is just so indicative of what I believe a lot of mothers go through when having a child. I think that there are a lot of pressures for them, a lot more pressure for them, at least in my own personal experience, to give up everything that they're doing in order to take care of their children. They lose so much of themselves in order to devote all of their time into raising kids. And I love that this movie takes the time to show how much of that can affect a parent and how much that can breed this resentment to leave, this emptiness that is filled with so much like resentment towards children and towards your life, because everything you have is slowly fading away from you, and you're watching it and you're simultaneously like happy that it's fading away because that means your children are healthy and growing, but at the same time you're left with this longing nothingness. Before I move on to my conclusion, I just want to point something out. Kendall and Brent, prior to the signal, by all accounts, are not bad parents, just like most parents. They are involved, they care about their children, they spend time with them, they provide for them, they give them freedom to explore the world. They are not physically or emotionally abusive, and ultimately, despite all the things I've laid out above, are willing to sacrifice their deepest wants and desires for the betterment of their family. They genuinely love their children, which is why I think that this is probably one of my favorite horror movies. This is why I love this horror movie. Not only can it be taken for schlocky dark comedy horror, it comments so well on one of the hardest battles in parenting, which is how do we balance giving all that we have to ensure our children are loved, protected, and cared for without losing ourselves completely in the process? Moreover, how do we do those things without harboring resentment and disdain for them? And it's in all of these things added up that should cause a parent to take pause for a moment and really examine themselves. Like, I know I had to. Like, I know that I am not the greatest parent, but I've realized that in some ways I still have the potential to harbor this sense of jealousy of the opportunities and innocence afforded to my children in their youth due to me possessing a cynical and tarnished worldview that comes with age. I do not revel in my younger years or the memories therein because I don't hold them as something like obtainable again, nor do I build the core of myself on the weak foundation of parental identity because that foundation is laid on consistently shifting sand. As parents, we are almost akin to castles built strong in the beginnings as a bastion of protection and exploration for our children that inevitably falls into ruin over the course of their changing world due to time and age. Walls no longer needed to keep them safe, but rather become things meant to be studied and appreciated for its history. And that's all I have. That's all I've got here. But I just wanted to say before I go, thank you again for watching. It means the world to me. And honestly, if you have any like comments or observations or anything like that of your own that you want to put in the comments, please put in the comments below because I would love to read them. And in all things, take care.